Welcome to East African Law Society webinar organized by the East African Law Society IP Committee. I'm the chair of the IP Committee. My name is Sande Godfrey Ngoba. I am the managing partner of a law firm called ABC Attorneys, which is based in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, with offices in Zanzibar and Dodoma. So today, we have a quite a diverse panel which cuts across East Africa. We are going to discuss on the commercial use of AI and data mining in East Africa, emerging trends and impact on data protection and intellectual property rights. So we have my co-moderator will be joining us later on. Her name is Catherine Kariuki. She's a partner at Triple OK law firm in Kenya. We'll be also joined by Kenneth Mwangi from Uganda, Michael, Mickey, we have the greatest Mzurikwao, we have Yusuf Said from Zanzibar, and Nana from Rwanda. So to kick off, I will start by giving a brief of bio of our panelists. They're not quite long, but very interesting. So let me just kick off by starting with Kenneth Mwangi, who specializes in intellectual property law, technology law, with a bias towards digital trade and fintech, data protection and privacy law as well, the fourth industrial revolution, drones, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, big data, and genetics and telecommunications as well. So Kenneth is the head of subject of intellectual property at the Uganda Christian University, and also he has conducted lectures on cyber law at the Makerere University Law School. He is also a chair of the inaugural East Africa Law Society Technology and Media Law Committee, and he has advised the government of Uganda on interaction for ICT into the education process for the courts of education. He has also acted in the field of artificial intelligence. He has convened a working group for Uganda and submitted a report to WIPO on IP policy. He has also been recognized as a leading intellectual property lawyer by the World Trademark Review for consecutively for 2009 up to 2022. And he has been a finalist, Partner of the Year in 2019 by the Africa Legal Awards. And his law firm KTA was awarded the coveted Africa Intellectual Property Team of the Year. We also have Dr. Deogratus Mzurikwao, who is a PhD holder from Kent University on applications of artificial intelligence in healthcare. He has also done his master's previously in AI at Tianjin University in China. In 2009, he was among the 15 AI researchers who received the IEEE Outstanding Young Investigator Research Visitor Award to Sapienza University in Italy. So he has published a number of articles while relating to nature and AI. Some have featured in the Forbes and the BBC. He has conducted AI-based consultation for big organizations such as UNDP, UNICEF, and Tanzania Ministry of Health. At of the moment, Deogratus has received a grant from Google to develop an AI-based screening tool for breast cancer, leading a team of Membilion University College with a grant from NIH to develop an AI-based screening tool for cervical cancer, and another grant from the Kuna Fund to develop machine learning ready database, a dataset for a prediction of rabies outbreak. Our third moderator will be Mr. Yusuf, Said Yusuf, who is from Zanzibar. Yusuf is a geospatial consultant based in Zanzibar, Tanzania, and he holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, as well as a Diploma of Computer Science from the State University of Zanzibar. Yusuf is a certified EBE drone trainer by Sensifly, and has also founded the Apps Clubs in Suza, that is a State University of Zanzibar, where students learn how to develop mobile applications for Android platforms. Currently, Yusuf is performing a number of training on drones and spatial data to different sectors, from the government to NGO, such as disaster management, agriculture, conservation, urban planning. And he's very eager to learn and spread the word on a wide range of Africa and other parts. We also have Mr. Michael Miki. Michael joined CSV Venture in February 2022 in Kenya as a CTO of Solve Kenya, a B2B marketplace. Solve Kenya is owned by SC UK Holdings Limited. Prior to his role, Michael was head of information technology and innovation at the Triple K law firm, where he led a law firm through a successful digital transformation and implementation of new legal tools leveraging technology. Michael's career started in 2014 at M Oriental Bank as a management trainee, and he rose quickly to the ranks of head of information technology in 2016. He then became a role chief information security officer at SM Bank, and he has several industry awards, most notably the Business Daily Top 40 Under 40 Men, that was in 2019, for his role in digital transformation within the legal industry, becoming the youngest awardee of that award. An advocate with a digital thinking, mental health in the workspace, Michael has published a number of academic articles in columns relating to technology, and he has also served in various boards, such as the advisory council member for FTDLD Registry, CIO East Africa, FinTech Summit, and so many others. Last on the panel today is Nana Samoa Tano, who is a sensational lawyer with rich knowledge and expertise in corporate and commercial law. He is also a barrister at law, a solicitor, an arbitrator, and a SAP Business One consultant. He is a smart contractor and assessist, and he has past exposure and experience in enterprise resource planning applications and database management implementation, which makes him a very top-notch tech lawyer as well. He's a member of the Rwandan Bar Association, the East African Law Society, and he's an associate member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, UK. He's also a member of the Young International Council for Commercial Arbitration. He is the head of the Intellectual Property and Technology Department at Abayo and Company LLP, which is a leading law firm in Rwanda. He holds a master's degree in business law, bachelor degree in business administration, and degree in law. So that is the very diverse panel of our speakers today. As you can imagine, they are very knowledgeable in the area of AI, in the area of IP, and in data mining, of which is our topic today. So I'm quite humbled to be amongst this panelists. I'll be moderating the first session, and my colleague will come later on. So to kickstart, let's start with our first question. And please turn on your video. I will start with you, Dr. Mzuri Kwao. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Let me adjust my light.
All right. So,
yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect, loud and clear. And nice to see you as well. Thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're very busy, but it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. All right, so I know you're an expert in this, knowing that you're coming from the medical background as well, and you have done quite a lot extensively in terms of technology, IE. So we wanted to start off so that our audience gets to understand what we are actually talking about, especially for those who have no idea or actually have an idea, but not as a diverse in terms of what does it mean when we speak of artificial intelligence. So what is AI? How does it work? What are its benefits? The techniques, let's say, around the examples of the emerging trends around, so to link that with the businesses, the consumers, the government. In a nutshell, what is AI? How does it work? Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Sundays. I'm glad to be here, to be involved with the legal people practicing legal in East Africa. It's my pleasure. So basically, to just give a quick background of exactly what is AI, take an example of human. When we are kids, we were able to learn new language, how to count, how to read, how to write. And as we keep on growing, we can learn how to drive a car. Some with the privilege, they can know how to fly a plane. We're all human, we are learning. So that's natural. But how do we learn? Because we are intelligent. For those who we believe in God, we believe that it's a gift from God on how to be able to learn these things. Even for those who don't believe in God, the intelligence is still there. That's why humans are able to learn new things. But that intelligence which enable human to learn new things is natural intelligence. We have it naturally. But when you keep this capacity on machines, and machines became able to do the task, the activities, all those things which are naturally being done by human, we say that machine also attain that level of intelligence. So the machine become intelligent, but it's not natural. It is artificial. That's where the term artificial intelligence comes in. So basically, in artificial intelligence, we have a lot of ways on how a machine can attain intelligence. But one of the common one, machine learning and deep learning. So in machine learning and deep learning is you pass previous data of a particular task if you want your algorithm to be able to perform exactly the same thing. For example, if you want to create a self-driving car using machine learning based, you have to take pictures and parameters of the roads, road signs, those zebra, traffic lights. Then the algorithm will go through all those data and it will become, it will attain the capacity as the human does. Or if you want someone to be able to speak, your algorithm to speak a certain language, you need to collect data of that particular language. Then the algorithm will go through those data, understand the patterns between data, then it attains that kind of intelligence. So that's machine learning based algorithm. And that's why we say most of the time, when we are training this AI based algorithm, we need previous data. If we want to create an artificial lawyer, we need all those law books which you read when you're at school, so the algorithm can go. The only difference comes like for you to become a good lawyer, you might need first to go to a law school, stay there for several years, and maybe practice for years until you become a good lawyer. But if we collect all those data, the artificial intelligence algorithm can go through that data maybe over a night. So the knowledge which you have attained over several years of practice, an artificial intelligence algorithm can attain within a few hours or maybe a night. So that's the major difference on how and why artificial intelligence is special, because it can attain its knowledge within a short time. And that's when we are talking about supercomputers. Now, for an AI algorithm to be able to attain this knowledge, it needs to go through this data. Try to assume the knowledge which you have collected for over maybe 10, 15 years of you practicing laws, then an AI algorithm needs to go through the same knowledge over a night. So we need a supercomputer so the algorithm can go through. So one of the advantages with human, speaking with the law perspective, a human, when he's sick, maybe even a very good lawyer can make mistakes, but an AI algorithm is a machine, it will never get mistake. A lawyer who has supervised maybe 3-4 cases in a day can start making some errors, some few mistakes, but an AI algorithm will never do that because to have that capacity is a machine. That's the only difference. But there's a very huge limitation on the AI side. An algorithm will fail to make any kind of judgment on the things which it have never seen before. Unlike us human with natural intelligence, the way we can navigate even for things which we didn't see before, we can use our common sense to make decisions. is different from the AI algorithm. An AI algorithm, which was trained to do diagnosis of breast cancer, it can't diagnose cervical cancer. An AI algorithm, which was created to drive a car in Nairobi, it might fail in Dar es Salaam, maybe, or maybe in Rwanda, because Rwanda and Kenya, they're driving cars in different sites. So it will fail in Rwanda. Unlike us human, we can survive, we can know how to navigate with the natural intelligence. So that's the major limitation. And also, there's a very huge challenge in AI algorithm that there's a chance this algorithm can be biased. Try to assume someone who, maybe a lawyer who have been receiving most of the cases about maybe the corruption. This AI algorithm, it might be biased to corruption cases and not maybe maybe other legal issues. So it can be bad, unlike human who can navigate. So that's a quick nutshell on what AI, what it can do and what it can't do. So we are still not yet at the level where we have general intelligence AI, but we have specific intelligence AI algorithm. Back to you.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah. It's interesting to know how
Sorry, I lost you for a few seconds.
Sorry, you lost me from there. I think it was my internet. Apologies for that. But saying is, it's interesting what you're saying. Now that we are linking that, we are linking it with law, we are linking with AI and what machine learning can do, and what it's doing so far in terms of driving economies, driving offices, and performing, let's say, surgeries and all these things. On the same note, Mr. Yusuf, we have spoken about what AI is. Doctor has painted a very nice picture. Now we are that understanding, we know what it can do, how it works, what are the benefits around it. But when it comes to big data and data mining, what is it? And how do they link? What is big data? And what is the difference between data mining and big data? Can you take us through that, please? Yusuf.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Doctor, for actually making a very brief definition on the AI. It's what has been indicated here when we say all of what we're doing is actually based on the data. And a doctor has already mentioned here in a statement by saying accumulation of information. So generate this information which has been generated is what we so-called data. And you can imagine these data can come from a different parts. If I should use an example from maybe a lawyer medical, let's try something what our mobile phones nowadays has. You can imagine a small mobile phones like the smartphones that we're having today. It actually accessing a lot of other services from the internet. And these services from internet of data that is actually being generated during the talks between these devices. And you can imagine maybe, for an example, one mobile phone in a day, it can create kind of an extra bytes of data just because of what it's asked the search engine, what it's populating from the social medias and other stuff. All these informations are actually really important. And this information cannot be treated just like a plain text information. There are videos, images, and the likes within the internet. Combining all of this is what we so-called, these are the big data now. And having actually been an ability businesses, all of that information is what's actually pertained within the realms of a big data, kind of in a nutshell. And when it's come to the mining, sometimes it's not like we are going to do kind of a hard work by saying we are going to dig on the ground, wasting some times and energy finding for the gods. Now, when we do mining, we are thinking about having the data mining. So data now is like a god. And there are a variety of platforms actually trying to access this data, try to collect this data from different kind of services that we are operating on. And this is what's so-called a data. And come to the data, big data and data mining. We can be in a position of saying, I want to understand the customer experience of using my certain applications. So all of that, the one who has actually built or using that services is being able to understand what my clients or my customer is looking at, is love to see what devices, for example, is being bought in which area, and all of that we are actually need to have what's so-called these supercomputers, which has been mentioned, in order to kind of process, analyzing this data and make sure they can be kept in a very neat way in which people they can be able to easily understand about this kind of data which are flowing around. For instance, we may be able to understand now because of the reach of involvement within the information technology services. Multiple platforms now actually try to talk to each other, and all of these platforms which are actually collecting them, we are creating this massive kind of data which are sometimes heavier even what we can imagine. For example, imagine you have a service that is only dealing with text, but now you have a service which are dealing with videos and images, and is creating a lot of complication actually in managing and analyzing the information. So simple to make it in the context, a big data is something where we say now we are generating a number of information which have a different magnitudes on the heaviness of this information, and all of these information actually need to be processed and need to be analyzed. So the methodologies and the tools are not like what the traditional tools which are actually being used to analyze this information. That is where exactly why sometimes it's coming the role of artificial intelligence in it, because it's not easy for just a human mind to say, let me sit and analyze this information, rather than creating these algorithms which can actually be able to predict, to give you a match of information from this information. So let me back to you in a short.
That's brilliant. You painted a very, very nice picture of now what big data is, what is data mining, because now for someone who is not aware of what mining is, he will take a very different concept of what does it mean when it comes to data and how do you mine it. So if it's a process of sorting through all that data and trying
I'm not sure if it
to use
is from
techniques
my
and see
side.
how
I
that
think
emulates. It's quite an insightful thing. So Dale, Dr. Dale.
Yes.
Dr. Dale, perhaps
Yes, sorry, come
can you
again?
hear me? Yes.
Yes,
So
I can hear.
yes, I was trying to link between
Sunday, I lost you. I can't hear you. Hello, whether it's my internet or it's yours.
Yeah, I was worried the same.
From the medical profession and data, what are the ethical issues that you could share with us?
Okay, first, as it has been mentioned by the previous speakers and also mentioned earlier, we rely on data to create this AI algorithm. Now the problem comes, how do we get data, especially in areas like healthcare? Because patients go to the hospital, they just need service. They're not going there to donate their data to be used for creating this AI algorithm. So before we create this AI algorithm, we have to make sure the people who are donating this data, the data which we are getting from people, those patients, they are aware of where this data set is going to be used. That one. Second, the current situation is most of the data being collected in our hospital are not ready for machine learning AI applications. Because in AI applications, we need this data to be labeled, but most of the data being collected, they are not ready for these applications, and most of them are not digitized. At least now it's great to see many hospitals are using digital systems. At least we can have digitized data for training, but most of the data are very noisy and they're not of good quality. Now, if you look online, you can find a number of public available healthcare data sets which have been collected, but most of the data set are from Western countries, because there they have things like GDPR, which protects the donators of data, but we don't have such kind of things local here. Now, big companies like this mobile communication company are collecting tons of data from us, but no one knows what they're doing with those data. If they're analyzing, they're using AI, no one knows. So is it ethical? Did we sign anywhere to consent that that data set is going to be used for what purposes? So that's one of the challenge. And another one is biasness. As I mentioned earlier, try to take a baby who grew up in violent environment. There's high chance this baby, when he or she grows up, there's high chance he will turn out to be violent also. So that's the kind of things he or she was open to. And those kids who grew up in very quiet, nice areas, most of them, I'm not saying 100%, most of them, they tend to grow being good people. So the same thing happens in artificial intelligence. If you train your algorithm maybe to differentiate between a cat and a dog, but most of the image being provided to the AI algorithm are of cats, there's high chance this algorithm will learn and understand more about the cat than the dog. So there's this kind of biasness. We have seen some AI algorithm being shut down in the US, which was used at the airport for facial recognition, just because it was discriminating Black people. But why? Because most of the people, most of the faces in the Western countries are white, not Black. So this algorithm was not created for this area. And that's one of the things which I'm worrying very much, unless we invest hugely in AI innovations in African context or in sub-Saharan, because if we keep on adapting AI algorithm being developed from the Western countries, they didn't test the data from our area. I remember I was constructed by a company somewhere in East Africa. They wanted me to create a credit score using social media data. And they wanted me to extract data from social media to create credit score. Later on, they wanted me to use data from the US to create the algorithm which was going to work in Tanzania. I tried to tell them that the social behavior of people in Europe, in the US and in Tanzania, they're different. So this algorithm won't work in our environment. It took a while for them to understand, but it was already going to be a problem if you create such kind of an algorithm. Another example, Google self-driving car, when it was first time tested in London, it failed to recognize the small cabs, the London iconic cars, because in the US, those cars are not available. So you can see if a company like Google had that kind of issue, so the biasness is very huge. Amazon created something called Amazon Pay, which was a chatbot for like a human resource reviewing the application. Later on, they realized this AI algorithm reviewing applications was biased towards men and rejecting many female applicants. So these are the things which we seriously need to look into. And that's why we have something called explainable AI. The same way a medical doctor tells you you are sick because of a certain disease, he can tell you based on this and this, how did he come into such kind of decision? If you apply for a loan to a bank and you get rejected, I think you have the right to know why you were rejected. So now we're moving towards explainable AI. At least now some of the AI algorithms can explain how they come to conclusion, make their decision. Those are my 2 cents. Back to you, Sandy.
Thank you. That was very, very detailed and opens up our discussion even more, because now I'm trying to bring that into the applicability of law now. Let's say, let me leave you with this and I move to Kenneth, and then I come back to you with this. Kenneth, let's talk about IP issues around AI. Now that we've understood that the AI systems use data to create value, and what are the IP issues that you think arise? For instance, who does the IP belong to? Can you lay a claim to aggregated data that includes PI? Are there any opportunities presented?
Sandy, thank you for that. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope it's still afternoon wherever you are, because it is afternoon in Kampala, Uganda. I really enjoyed the presentations or the discussions that my previous panelists have spoken about, specifically around the nature of artificial intelligence. And it's good now to really delve into the legal aspects of it. And Sandy, as you mentioned, there are intellectual property concerns or considerations whenever you're looking at artificial intelligence. Perhaps for those that are attending, I assume most of us are lawyers, but I know that on the panel, we do have techies. And for anyone else who is interested in the law, I'll just try perhaps just to define intellectual property generally. As we know, this is a set of legal rights that protect creations of the mind. And this can be artistic, literary, scientific works, inventions, designs, anything basically that has that tangible aspect of human creativity or innovation will most likely get intellectual property protection. And if you're looking at artificial intelligence, from the nature of artificial intelligence, which is software, most of our intellectual property regimes categorize or will recognize artificial intelligence as a copyrightable work. And from there, we start with Article 10 of the TRIPS Agreement. The TRIPS Agreement is a trade-related aspects of intellectual property, which is a document that most of our jurisdictions have copied from or have gotten their legal framework form specifically around intellectual property, and specifically intellectual property within the commercial arena. And so most of our countries, as I said, are signatories, and I'm aware that all our East African countries are signatories to the TRIPS Agreement. And under Article 10, we see that computer programs are protectable as copyright. And so that is important because, again, if you then look into most of our laws, although they don't specifically mention artificial intelligence, the fact that they're computer programs puts them squarely within the ambit of the copyright regime. I know that in other developed jurisdictions, there are user cases where they see artificial intelligence perhaps has aspects of novelty, has aspects of inventive step, and of course, perhaps even has aspects of industrial applicability, especially as applied within hardware. And in these jurisdictions, you may be able to get a patent, but in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Kenya, in Rwanda, if we're looking at artificial intelligence, then we're looking at it in terms of copyright. And specifically as well, since we're also looking at data and data mining, under our copyright laws, we see that databases or compilations are also considered as copyrightable material. For example, under Section 5 of Uganda's Copyright Act, databases are clearly mentioned as copyrightable material. And many of these databases that can be or are harvested by artificial intelligence And so then, of course, if we start from there, the question is, if it is artificial intelligence, perhaps, okay, maybe we can say not acting on its own volition, since, as I think Deo is one who mentioned, that the application that we have for artificial intelligence at the moment is of narrow AI. But I am aware that you have other jurisdictions, and in very perhaps limited cases, where you do have artificial intelligence operating in a general sense. This is that it has been taught. And just like the example we gave of a baby that learns by exploring the world, we do have artificial intelligence that has learned or is learning and has grown perhaps to the age of an adult, if you're looking at it in human terms. And so that learning has allowed it to be able to create things of its own. And number two, has also allowed it to be able to harvest data sets. And those data sets are important in many industries. For example, in the health industry, I'm sure if artificial intelligence perhaps found new surgical techniques, and these techniques were kept in a particular database, or if that general artificial intelligence that we are talking about actually then creates bodies of literature or works of art, as we've seen. Although the artificial intelligence that we're used to, especially one that is creating, let's say, art, and I will touch on that a little bit later. Now, in that particular instance, the question then, is begotten: who owns that data set? So who owns the database rights that exist in that body of work that has been compiled? Many cases and many jurisdictions have said that that intellectual property can only be owned or registered by a human person. And so there's a case law from the US. There's a case that I had gotten for the lawyers here, which is Faced Publications versus Rural Telephone Service Company. This is a US case. We can share this presentation later so that you're able to get these cases and many others. That so that at least in the US, the fruits of intellectual labor are really the precursor to intellectual property protection. And so those fruits in particular, according to the US copyright law, are founded in the creative powers of the mind. And so it's still a question out there if artificial intelligence does have a mind, especially since we're seeing that artificial intelligence, although in many cases mirrors the mind or the brain, in many other cases, it goes even beyond that brain capability. And so perhaps there are many theories as to whether there is a new form of consciousness that is created as a result of the application of AI within those systems. So if you're looking at intellectual property in particular, and if you're looking at copyright protection, the ownership of those database rights, I think, is first and foremost one of the key things that we look at when we're looking at artificial intelligence. The other one, of course, which also hints to the first, is the idea or the understanding of who can be an author. And I gave you that US case. So it is interesting, or it will be interesting in the next few years or in the next few decades, if we could have jurisdictions perhaps that go deeper or delve deeper into this issue of artificial intelligence, and perhaps even accord them the ability to be able to create. And that can be able to, and that definitely will give them new rights. But at the moment, as we have it, it is the human beings behind these systems that would essentially own any intellectual property that is created in that regard. Outside of that, which is something that I had started with, since I mentioned that AI in East Africa at least is categorized as copyright or within the body of copyright. I know that, again, there may be other discussions that look at more sophisticated AI. Since for copyright, especially for infringement to occur, you must have what we call direct copying, where you copy something from here and put it here. And I guess that would be the limitation of copyright protection for artificial intelligence, especially since the main aim of intellectual property protection is to spur innovation or to spur creativity, to help people to be able to, get more incentive to be able to create more. And so the question as to whether perhaps artificial intelligence in particular should get patent protection as compared or in comparison with it getting copyright protection is one that is, I believe, gaining traction. And it is for the listeners or viewers today to be able to determine for themselves whether artificial intelligence does fit within those three aspects of patent protection that I mentioned, which is novelty, inventive step, and industrial applicability. Outside of, actually in 2020, the US Patent Office also denied a patent application filed on behalf of a system called the BOOS, which is actually, this is the European Patent Office, called the BOOTS, which was an intellectual property system that was built by a gentleman called Stephen Thacher. So the reasoning of the European Court was again that the system lacked that aspect of novelty, and as such, anything that we created would not fit within that legal ambit or would not fit within that protection that is given by a patent. Outside of that, of course, also, if we're going back to what I mentioned about database rights, I know there, for those, again, for the lawyers, there's a case in the UK, the British Horse Racing versus William Hill. This is, I think, a case that was decided in 2004, if I have that correctly, where they were basically defining what a database is. A database, which is a compilation generally, as far as that case was concerned, was saying it's a collection of works, data, or other material separable from one another without the value of the contents being affected, including a method or system for the retrieval of each of its constituent materials. And so database right was reserved for databases in which there has been qualitatively or quantitatively a substantial investment in obtaining, verification, or presentation of the content therein. And so again, if artificial intelligence is the one that has compiled these data sets, and it is, does it then pass that test of qualitative and quantitative, especially since the human being, the one who should apply for these rights? Although, as I mentioned to you, from the onset, that the law at the moment is that the owners or creators of this AI would be the ones to benefit from these rights. But if you now go, deeper into the nature or the philosophy, so to speak, of intellectual property, would it be fair for you to accord protection to someone who has not put in the work to be able to collect these databases, especially if they have been created by a particular system? If that happens, perhaps can those datasets be owned? Can those rights then perhaps go into the body of work that is categorized as public works? Again, that's something I really don't have an answer to, but it would be interesting to hear from the other panelists as to what they think in regards to that. So generally, I think those would be the issues I would talk about in regarding intellectual property and artificial intelligence. Perhaps later on, we can also then, be able to look at it in terms of data protection and the implications or issues that arise therein. Sunday, back to you.
Thank you. And I agree with you. You cannot separate intellectual property from AI, from that. And later, yes, we'll talk about it. But let me just, Nana, I hope you are there. Let me just jump onto Nana some more. In line with what Kenny has said. Now we have seen the link between intellectual property, that is between law and AI, and we have looked at the role that IIP plays and the issues around it. What do you think, or what have you come across in terms of legal hurdles and gaps of use of AI, big data, data mining techniques? So what are the current, let's say, legal and human rights hurdles that are presented by the use of AI in line with your practice over the years? The floor is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. And then I'm sorry I joined in late. So I'm not pretty sure I got some of what the panelists said. So to begin with, I believe some of the panelists have laid the foundation of what AI is and how it mimics human behavior. So juggling this with the current legal and fundamental rights, I mean, there is some kind of lapses which AI and big data pose to human and legal rights. Because AI can demonstrate human recognition, in a way it affects the enjoyment of fundamental human rights, which are enshrined in various constitutions and also enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which are purposely made for natural persons, if I may say that. Now, the use of big data and AI also threatens the right to equality. And I think Dr. Deogratis said that it has a way of discriminating race. Yes, so AI and big data also bring discrimination. And one of the big hurdles that we are facing with AI and big data are privacy. You know, because it's AI and AI can access data. It has a way of leaking your information, sharing it across board without your consent. So the use of these technologies can affect a range of sectors and areas of life, such as education, work, social care, and even health. And then it normally affects people such as refugees, asylum seekers, and then older people. So when we look at cybersecurity attack, for instance, seeing as AI use algorithm and code, which enables the machines to mimic human behavior, they sometimes make them vulnerable to cyber attacks. Let's take, for instance, a fully automated decision-making by AI may lead to constant errors and then fatalities. And then such attacks have an adverse impact on fundamental citizens. And then it tempers with our rights and our freedom of expression and even our free flow of information. Looking at SMEs and then big companies which heavily rely on AI, supposing there's cyber attacks and then there are breach on them, you see, it kind of block their access to information, and then they cannot freely express whatever they want to say. So, and when we look at the gaps and challenges, I believe that if we want to effectively address the issue of cyber attack, we require proactive and then responsive use of cybersecurity policies at each various stage of developing the AI. But in reality, this cannot happen. I mean, in reality, it looks far-reaching. But I believe if they can put strategies and tools in place to address this issue, we can get there. And let's look at data protection issue. AI poses huge privacy and data protection challenges, as this can be seen in the areas of infringement of your data protection. And this will affect your right to privacy, and then it also affects your integrity. Supposing you are there and then your information are leaked, what you do privately with your private social life are leaked by some fatalities of this AI. It can even demean it can even affect your behavior. And then it can even affect how you react to people in the society as a result of this. So I believe that these are some of the legal hurdles AI poses. And then when we look at intellectual property, for instance, there are some, as my colleague said earlier, there are some issues pertaining to intellectual property when it comes to AI. You see, it's an undisputed fact that intellectual property forms part of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And also, when you look at every constitution, every person has the right to own property. So when we look at AI, for instance, AI raises the issue with respect to right to own the property alone or right to own the property with other people. So you see, when there is a violation on IP by a machine, who are we going to blame? Are we going to blame the machine, or we are going to blame the programmer? Is the programmer going to be responsible, or is the machine going to be responsible? Now, there's a lapse between who is the author of the invention. Is it the programmer, or is it the person using the machine? And then, as my colleague earlier expressed, most of the IP laws have not factored AI in their laws. AIs are not factored in most of these IP laws. And this is one of the challenges that AI poses for us. And when you look at unfairness and then bias, there's a likelihood that AI may lead to bias and unfairness. For instance, facial recognition. Some of these tools used by AIs are unable to recognize the faces of, let's say, people of color like myself. And then I would say, yes, I'm being discriminated because per the Constitution, I'm not, you cannot discriminate against my color. So if AI cannot recognize my face, then I'm being discriminated. Do you understand? So coming from the legal perspective, these are some of the challenges, in my opinion, I think AI poses to us. And I think as time goes on, countries and then the world institutions will come together, and AI is now springing up. So I think as time goes on, things are being put in place for these hurdles to be tackled. So this is what I have to say.
Thank you for painting the picture.
Hello, Sandy. I don't know. Asamoah has tickled something. I just wanted to highlight something small.
Please. Yes, please. Go ahead.
Well, Asamoah was actually talking about liability of artificial intelligence. And actually, one of the things I also want us to think about is this question of fair use. If you look at the TRIPS agreement, it provides for the 3-step test whenever you're dealing with fair use and copyright infringement. So fair use generally is a defense to copyright infringement, in the sense that I can be able to use copyrightable material, I can be able to use trademarked material, even patented material, without consent or authorization from the holders or owners of this material, as long as I fit within a certain criteria or category. And so this criteria or categories in our intellectual property laws, in particular in our copyright laws. In Uganda, I think that's under Section 15 of our Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act. It's up to you to check to see the correct provisions under your particular laws. But the 3-step test, is that one, every country in the world should be able to provide or should be able to create avenues under the law that allow for exceptions, where people can be able to exploit copyrightable work without going to the copyright owner. In special cases, where those special cases where that does not interfere with the ordinary exploitation of the work. And number 3, where it also does not prejudice the rights of the copyright holder to be able to earn money from their creations. And so, the question then arises, again, if you're looking at fair use, would it be fair, going with the term, to accord or to give any, the creators of this AI or the authors of these systems, the protection that's accorded under fair use if they use artificial intelligence, for example, to mine huge data sets that may not ordinarily have been possible for a normal human mind. When the 3-step test was proposed to countries all over the world, I believe artificial intelligence was not as prevalent as it is now, and perhaps that consideration was not a major consideration at the time. So it is a question really for us to answer, specifically for our lawmakers, to see whether the 3-step test that we have under our laws, under fair use, is that scope limited only to use by human beings, or can that also extend to machines or artificial intelligence that have the power to perhaps do more than what, for example, if you're using something for personal use, if it's artificial intelligence that's using something for personal use, how can it be said to be, for personal use, if perhaps then that artificial intelligence is going to send that information, for anyone else on the web to be able to access it? Or if you're going to look at what literary works, and fair use allows you to be able to get quotations from those books, is it also fair use if artificial intelligence gets all those quotations perhaps and categorizes them properly, such that an entire book actually has quotations, but those quotations are spread out all over the internet, all over the web, not in one place, And so these are things I think that are exciting to be able to think about. And so as Asamoah was speaking, I thought it was important to add that element of fair use or copyright infringement as part of the discussions for artificial intelligence. Thank you, Sunday.
All right. And before you go away, Kenny, so we link that as well, because we've touched on fair use, but now I want you to talk about, because he had also, Asamoah had touched on AI and on data protection and privacy issues. Even in Tanzania at the moment now, there's a bill at the parliament regarding to data protection. And now the discussions are around that. But then there's big giant in the room now, AI, and that comes into play. Now, making sense of that, yes, AI, data protection, privacy issues that arise in connection with the use of AI, the use of big data, in commercialization of data, and the threats that poses to privacy. Now, how do you protect privacy as privacy in terms of AI-driven world? What are the confines? And then from the legal perspective, the laws, should they change? What is your perspective from the Ugandan side and globally? What is your take on that?
Okay, Sandy, thank you. I think in answering that question, it's very important first and foremost to make a distinction between data protection and privacy. When we're looking at privacy, we're looking at the right to be let alone. And I think Asamoah did mention the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Most of our constitutions also provide for the right to privacy. At least I know the Ugandan constitution does. Outside of that, you also have the African Union Convention on Data Protection and Cybersecurity. On the African Union Convention on personal data protection and cybersecurity that also provides for privacy. And so ultimately, I don't think in the world of the internet or in this the world of the fourth industrial revolution, there is such a thing as absolute privacy or even privacy at all. I think we have given away those rights when we use many of these applications, because either we have consented to us giving away our privacy, or it's not even possible for you to function in a modern society or in modern workplaces. If you're very restrictive on your privacy, you'd have to be a reclusive billionaire. But before you become a billionaire as well, you've already given out your privacy somehow. So I think that is a separate discussion. So perhaps the question should be as to the limit to that invasion of privacy, or in instances where you have actually not, given out your privacy. But if we're looking at artificial intelligence, I'd feel perhaps the question would be around data protection, but why the two are linked is that data is really a big asset. Many have coined the terms that data is the new oil. At the moment, I don't even think it's still categorized as a new oil because it's been here for a while. And so databases or companies that utilize data, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, these are companies that have made billions of dollars, and these are the ones that are now leading the charge, especially in policy all over the world. But ultimately, if we're looking at artificial intelligence and data protection, Uganda does have a Data Protection and Privacy Act, and I'm proud to say that as a result of having that act, that has then, that then set the ball rolling for the other East African countries to also enact their own laws on data protection. And as I speak, I think Kenya does. I think Tanzania should have one, or is in the process of creating one. Rwanda has also just, should be also in the process of creating one if they haven't already passed theirs recently. South Sudan, we yet to see where that is going to come out. And under that under all those laws, since especially within the context of Africa, we borrow from the African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection. We have principles of data protection that we are supposed to follow, that makers of artificial intelligence are supposed to follow, that artificial intelligence itself, since it is intelligent, is supposed to follow. Some of these principles are, for example, you should collect data in a lawful, fair, and transparent manner. Again, with the nature of artificial intelligence, I'm not sure the data collected is collected fairly. I'm also not sure the data is collected transparently, since this artificial intelligence utilizes huge sets of databases and huge sets of data that perhaps the ordinary human brain or mind could not be able to collect. There's also a principle of limitation on data. Again, if you go back to that example, how artificial intelligence collects huge chunks of data, that I believe also breaches that particular aspect of limitation. And also that also follows on data minimization, only collect data sets that are relevant to what you're doing. But with artificial intelligence, the acceptable collection of data is collect everything, and within those data sets, you can be able to pick and choose what you want, and you keep the other one for later. You never know when you might need it. And then of course, there's also the importance of accuracy. of data. If you're utilizing narrow AI, where you're giving it a set of instructions and telling it exactly what to do, then the question is, do the creators of this narrow AI actually go further to be able to ensure that the data sets they have are kept up to date? The previous presenter spoke about bias, and this is something that still continues because you have AI, let's say, that was created 10 or 15 years ago, perhaps then when the laws were not, for example, where racism in particular, or bias, which is coder bias, was not something that was discussed as often as it is now. So are those systems updated to ensure that the data sets they have about the human beings that utilize these systems or interface with these systems are depicted in the correct manner? Is that data accurate? Outside of that, there's also a principle on storage limitation. Ultimately, I think we see that the more data you collect, the larger the volumes of data you collect, the more difficult, the easier it is for your system to be hacked, the easier it is for you to be able to lose the data. Now, under our laws, we have mechanisms that compel you a data controller. A data controller is someone who controls the data sets they have in their possession. And the terms that we have under laws are data controller, data processor, who's hired by a data controller to be able to process data on their behalf. And artificial intelligence would actually perhaps fit within the definition of a data processor. But since we also have then we also have a data collector, someone who collects data. So AI can play all those three roles. Although perhaps, if I may, if I may even be more specific, the law says that a data processor will not include an employee or someone who is employed by the company to be able to process data. That person still has the designation of a data controller or data collector. And so that artificial intelligence then really still becomes a data collector or data controller. So if then they're the data controller or data collector, the principles of data protection really apply to them even more. And this issue of storage limitation is one that, again, artificial intelligence, I think, doesn't pass well on that. And then, of course, integrity and confidentiality, the security of data. Of course, maybe that it can be argued that AI systems are more advanced and as such are more secure. So maybe we could say that on this, perhaps we could get a bigger or better pass than the other principles. But how about then this principle for accountability in terms of what are you using the data sets that you're collecting for? It's usually data should only be used for the purpose for which it is collected. But if you have systems that can keep this data and also be able to pick from these data sets to make or predict other things later on, outside of what they have been coded to do, the question then arises as to who is accountable for that data. And so data protection is really a key concern whenever you're looking at artificial intelligence. And so I feel that perhaps it is necessary for policymakers to now try and see, especially as artificial intelligence becomes prevalent, how do we update our laws to be able to answer these questions that I've asked specifically around the nuances of data data protection. Maybe lastly, under data protection, is that issue of cross-border transfer of data. Under most of our laws, it is mandatory for you, I don't want to say mandatory, but it is good practice for you to ensure that when you transfer data to a country outside of your jurisdiction, you do so, the data is transferred to a country that has adequate laws or adequate protection. But since artificial intelligence in most instances will operate in the cloud, it's also difficult to be able to ascertain if the AI that is collecting your data is collecting it from a country that cares or values data protection. It even gets more complicated because now you have adequacy decisions from like the European Data Protection Office looking at countries like the United States, saying that because they have very tough surveillance laws, that perhaps the United States may not be the best country to be able to send this data to. But as we know, most of the artificial intelligence that we shall use, because the United States is a developed jurisdiction, will come from the United States. So we don't have any adequacy decisions at the moment from any data protection authority in the region. But the question still arises as to whether artificial intelligence does follow the rules or best practice when it comes to the cross-border transfer of data. So that issue of data portability, especially with artificial intelligence, is one that really requires a lot more insight. I apologize to the people who are listening. I really also don't have these answers. Many of these are questions that we need to sit and interface. And maybe that's why having these webinars, especially regional webinars, where we're finding out what's happening in other countries, will help us all find an answer as we move forward. Responsible communication and responsible use for artificial intelligence.
Perfect. You have touched on the fact that this webinar is cutting across jurisdictions, and we have Doctor. I would like to hear from Doctor or from Yusuf your perspective on what Ken was saying. Can you add a bit on that, if you have anything, before I jump on to another question? Dr. Deo?
I have nothing to add. I totally agree with most of the content which Kenneth have said.
Oh, okay. All right. Good. All right. So moving on. Nana, can I put you back on the spotlight?
Yes. Hi, Sunday. Yes.
Good. So I just wanted to move on from what Ken has said, but still linking to the liability around it in terms of when we are associating the use of AI, big data mining techniques around. Do you see any liability issue around that? And in your experience, maybe is there something you can share with us if it has come across you before?
So if you talk about liability, are we looking at liability on the part of the AIs, or liability on the part of people regulating the AIs or people using the AIs?
Well, yes, so we are looking at it. But then before we proceed, let me bring on board Catherine, my co-moderator. Catherine.
Yes, Sunday. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Welcome on board. I've been with this gentleman for the past 1 hour, quite insightful, and I feel like it's about that time I give the floor to you to take over. It's been very, very insightful, but there are a couple of issues that have arisen, which I think we can carry on to discussions, and then we'll bring in the participants to questions. But if you could take up the last question, I was just about to finish up with Nana.
Yeah.
I leave this to you. You carry on from there, and I take leave, if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Sunday, and thank you for holding forth. Good evening, everybody. I caught the last 30 minutes of the conversation, very insightful and engaging conversations. So good evening. So I'll just pick up from where Sunday has left. And I think he was bringing up the issue of liability. And Nana, so you can touch on both approaches. So liability in terms of where they leverage on AI, big data, and data mining techniques. What are the key issues related to liability? You know, whether, let's say, if you're a prosecuting counsel, whether whichever side you are on, if, say, in case of data breaches, yeah, in case of a data breach, what are the conversations that would, or arguments that would arise in that case, in cases where related to use of AI, big data, data mining techniques? So you can touch on both approaches, because for the participants, there's one who would end up maybe coming up with the liability considerations, you know, as a counsel for or against the parties. So you can touch on both sides. Would love to hear your thoughts on that. And maybe, so Nana, you can touch on it, and then maybe we can push it to Kenneth or the other panelists to also, if they want to jump on that and add on that issue of liability.
So, okay, so in terms of liability, in regards to data breaches, normally the data controllers have key responsibilities to implement data security measures. And then they also have to maintain a record of personal data processing operations. So when there is a breach, they are required to notify the regulatory authority within a specific time. They became aware of the breach. And failure to do so, they will be fined. There are some fines that the regulatory authority will impose on them. And when a personal data is breached or is likely to be breached, there's a high risk of human rights and freedom of the subject or the person whose data has been breached. There's a high risk of his fundamental rights being breached. And when this happens, the data controllers like maybe the telcos or and so on and so forth, they must communicate the breach to the data subject after becoming aware of it as well. So maybe as a prosecutor, as a prosecutor from a prosecuting background or from a prosecuting perspective, you hold the data controllers and then the data processors responsible because they are to carry the data protection impact assessment and also implement data security measures. So I think that they are the ones who are to be held liable in terms of breach of data.
Okay, thank you for that. So, and I'll open this up also. So this is to Nana, Kenneth, and the other panelists. Do you feel there are any gray areas that would present themselves when it comes to approaching the issue of, liability, especially say like where you use AI and, then there's an issue of ownership, who owns this data, the data that's fed into the AI when it comes to data mining and the techniques used, if it's public data that's used. Are there gray areas that would be presented that would be what we call emerging issues that would arise in the scope of liability when you're talking about liability and who is liable and the extent of liability? Do you feel there are any, say, gray areas or gaps or I'd say regulatory gaps that haven't yet been addressed and should be looked into, and that we can introduce into this conversation to try and assess, the emerging areas within this scope of liability? I'll start with you, Kenneth. I see you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Rose, and it's good to see you. Thank you for joining. I think ultimately, yes, we do have some gray areas, or a number of them, or really the entire topic of artificial intelligence is a gray area whenever you're looking at liability, because the biggest question really is who is liable. I think there are a few cases that we've seen that liability has been whenever AI performs or commits an offense really, or does something in contravention of any law, of any regulation, we find that it is the authors or owners of this artificial intelligence that perhaps should be liable. But I'm not aware of anyone that's been convicted on behalf of artificial intelligence. And so, as I said, really the entire field of AI is really a gray area. And if I may then maybe just be able to go into, the philosophy of it or the psychology of it. There's a book I like called The Mind Club. I think it's by a gentleman called Daniel Wegner. And so he was asking the question as to, would you, if you had a baby sitting on the ledge and playing with a gun, and maybe somehow a bullet is let off from the gun as a result of the baby playing with the gun, would you make the baby liable? And then would the answer be different if there was a robot, artificial intelligence that was with the baby, and perhaps this artificial intelligence or this robot was created or coded specifically to take care of a baby and to make sure that the baby is secure? So you'd think maybe because it has been given a gun as part of its data sets to know that if you see, of course, a gun anywhere near a baby, take it away. But if that machine does not do that, would you then hold the robot liable in that particular respect? I think for many, the answer then would be different because a baby really does not have agency. Babies are exploring the world. I like that example that Deo gave at the beginning, to really comparing babies and artificial intelligence, and how they develop and learn, how babies' consciousness develops and learns is really how AI also develops and learns its intelligence. And so since baby does not have agency, but a robot may be seen to have agency because it can operate on its own. And in many respects, especially as I said, if you're looking at the application within general artificial intelligence, which is AI that's not really told to do everything, it's just given broad instructions and then it's up to it to be able to answer or to learn as it goes along. The question there, still arises. If that happens, should you decommission that artificial intelligence? Is there any liability that goes to the human being? Because the human being really, especially if you're looking at the ingredients of an offense under our legal systems, you have to have mens rea and and the actus reus. The mens rea is the intention to be able to commit an offense, and that is a very key ingredient in order for you to be convicted. Let's say for an offense of murder or for theft, you have to have the intention of depriving someone of their property. Now, if you create or if you code artificial intelligence and you tell it, okay, you can do whatever that you want to do, and then in essence, perhaps it goes beyond your instructions because it is learning, and since it operates like a human being, if you raise a child, you know that especially as teenagers will do whatever they want to do. It doesn't matter what instructions you have given to them. So let's give AI the same mind of a teenager. And if it then goes over and beyond the instructions that you have given to it and it commits an offense, can you successfully be prosecuted, especially if you can prove that from how you coded that particular machine, you did not give it that, you didn't give it the permission, so to speak, to be able to commit the offense that it did? And we see that practically, if you're looking at, for example, there are examples over the internet for those Twitter bots, especially for companies that use them to be able to answer or to respond to messages. And I think there was a story a while ago, I think it was a food company, maybe KFC or something like that. I could be wrong. Perhaps those attending could be able to verify that, which particular company that was, but that put up a Twitter bot on Twitter, obviously. And so this Twitter bot, of course, was learning from the comments and everything online on Twitter. And it then ended up being racist. And so if you then have laws against racism, or even if you don't have laws, if you're just looking at ordinary morality or the goodness of people, and something that you have created is now becoming racist, are you liable for whatever it is saying? Or even if you avoid that liability, are there any ethical considerations to consider? Perhaps that before you create this system, you should have known that it was going to learn from the people that are on Twitter. If you go on Twitter now, you will see really half of the people abusing themselves, half of the other people are writing whatever they're writing. So that should be something perhaps that you should consider before you start. And now I think we have pieces of legislation like the European Union recently published, that was in 2021, harmonized rules on the use of artificial intelligence. And so these are supposed to guide countries as to how to safely use AI in an ethical manner. The ethics of artificial intelligence, I think, is a discussion that still goes to liability. So I feel even outside of that, if you also look at consumer protection, for example, in many of our laws, although, for example, in Uganda, we have the Electronic Transactions Act, which allows companies to send unsolicited communication. These are unsolicited commercial communication. So then, but it also then says that you can only be able to do so if you have an option to opt out, if someone can cancel that subscription later on. But with artificial intelligence, if it's the one sending these, these adverts, is there any extra level of liability since you're, sending a machine to be able to interface with human beings? Outside of that, of course, the biggest liability question is also the data sets that it collects. We've been talking about data protection the entire time, and it then reminded me of that Netflix documentary, The Social Network, The Social Dilemma. I don't know if any of you have watched it. Rose, I see you, Catherine, I see you shaking your head. You've watched it, yes. So you see really how dangerous these social media platforms are, and especially since most of these use artificial intelligence, the liability when it comes to consumer protection, the liability when it comes to protection as well of minors who are using these social media platforms or who are accessing many of the data sets that are collected by these systems. These are all things that I think we still need to look into and that really don't have any clear answers. Catherine, I hope that answers your question.
Oh, wow. I think it really, it does, and it really, I think, triggers our thought, because as you said, this is a new and emerging area. So it's more of triggering our thought. And before we proceed, Kenneth, please
Catherine,
remind us the name of the book. Sorry,
Catherine,
Nana.
to add to what Kenny said, in a situation whereby the programmer is aware that the AI will tend to infringe any IP rights, then in such case, the liability will fall on the programmer, as he is aware that as he has the knowledge that there will be an infringement behind creating the program or creating the AI, then the programmer will be held liable.
Well, that's interesting. So, and would the programmer also be held liable? I think there's something that Ken raised about the potential. Would they also be held liable of the potential? The fact that when they programmed it, it did not intend to have a certain consequence, but it is a possibility that, for instance, the example that he gave, it was not intended that that AI would probably have consequences that dealt with, say, the racism or racial remarks or something like that. Would they be held liable in that case, so that it's a case of strict liability? At the moment you program or the moment.
No, so in such a situation, it will be difficult to prove that the programmer knew or was aware that the program or the AI would tend to lead this way. In such a scenario, it will be difficult to prove. However, when you are aware that, when you can show proof that the programmer was aware or he knew that this AI would lead to this, then it's easier for the programmer to be liable. Like, this is the difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so then what that brings into foreplay is probably the consideration that we might want to look at our existing laws and probably update them in a way that also includes, say, emerging issues such as AI and these current trends, so that things like menswear, as Kenneth had pointed out, things like menswear and things like those are not the same issues that are considered, say, when you're considering criminal acts when it comes to, or liability when it comes to using AI. And I think one of the things that he mentioned, so like in Kenya, we have the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, which is quite recent, but despite the act being very recent, it does not anticipate, or you can tell that it does not include or has not placed thought on, say, crimes that are propagated through, say, the things that we're discussing today. So that just alludes to the regulatory gaps that would be there. And from what Nana and Kenneth, you've raised, there's also the issue of probably coming up with policies that factor in AI, or at least guidelines or AI policies, and probably this would now lead to the harmonization of laws or updating of laws to include that. So thank you for pointing that out, Nana. So I can see people are asking that you provide the name of the book again. There's a book that you mentioned. So if you can just place the name of the book in the chat section. I can see they're asking that. Oh, thank you for that. So
yeah, it's the Mind
Nana,
Club.
I don't know if, oh, thank you for that. And thank you for the thought-provoking sentiments. So I'm also still going on the issue of liability still. I'm open up. So I don't know if Nana, you wanted to add anything else before I go to Dr. Dio and Yusuf and hear what their thoughts are on this. Nana?
Yeah, so I think on the issue of liability, my colleague Ken has touched on every aspect of it. Yes, so I think that's fine.
Oh, thanks for that. Dr. Dio?
Sorry, come again? I lost you for a few seconds.
Oh, sorry. So I'm still opening it up to you, like continuing the conversation that Kenneth and Nana had touched on, still on the issue of liability, and to what extent it is, and what are the key considerations that would be associated with this conversation. Just your thoughts on this issue of liability of when you use AI.
Yes, mine is mostly on the regulations around AI. Many African countries, we don't have regulations around AI. If an AI algorithm makes a mistake, who do we take to court? Are there any standards required for an AI algorithm to reach before it is taken to the market? We don't have that kind of regulations. And even those in the regulatory authorities, many of them, they don't have a knowledge yet about what exactly is AI. I'll give you a practical example. Here in Tanzania, we're already using an AI algorithm for screening of TB cancer, for tuberculosis. But we tried to register the product at the TMDA, but the procedure of registration is totally different because they are used to register medical devices, but this is the software. So if you look at the procedure for registering that product, is totally different. So a registration process which was supposed to take 3 months is now taking 5 months of pushing and following up to just explain to them what exactly this is. So first is for regulatory authority to open up that there are new products, there are new technologies being emerging, so they can at least involve experts of those areas to make sure we have regulations around this product. Mentioned earlier, AI products can seriously make mistakes. We have seen self-driving cars hitting people. We have seen AI software discriminating between white and black people. We have seen AI software discriminating between men and women. So if we don't have, at least in developed countries, for example, in Europe, we have the GDPR. At least through these regulations, these discriminatory products can be stopped earlier. Now imagine for African countries in which many of them, they don't have regulations around AI. So to be reliable, I think we really need strong regulations around AI. My worry is if we don't regulate it now, and maybe a few AI products make to the market and cause maybe harm, the governments might rush and ban most of the AI solutions just because a few of them, which was not properly created, cause harm. They will just try to ban everything. Now look at Apple. Many of us were using Apple Watch, we're using iPhone. Just 2 weeks ago, Apple announced they're going to use our data for healthcare insurance. So basically, they'll be analyzing the data. They will know the major conditions you are facing. So when you go for insurance application, they will inform that company that this person, there's high chance, probably he might survive in the next 10 years, or is having this kind of complications. So maybe don't give him a premium. And for the person who have been healthy for the past 5 years based on the Apple device we've been using, maybe that company might be advised, okay, give this person premium because he won't be disturbing you with claims. So if we don't have regulations, yeah, we are creating it's just a timing bomb. Those are my 2 cents.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Dio. And I think you raised a very valid point about, I think in the past, there has been the risk associated with regulations catching up with innovation. And maybe it is about time when regulations probably, came into the picture and guided, the innovation, not guiding the innovation, not in a way that stifles innovation, but in a way that doesn't necessarily mean that regulation is always playing catch up because of the risk that you pointed out. That's quite interesting and thought-provoking. Yusuf, would you like to add on to this conversation about liability? Yusuf, I don't know if you're still online.
Yeah, I think that the internet kicked me out and then suddenly took me back. What Doc has already has already said. Totally agree. Most of the African countries, we are not actually ready when it's come to the legislative, like the regulations and other things regarding the use of AI. And here we need to kind of understanding one thing. Whenever we are speaking about these AI tools, we need to understand there are some kind of, we can categorize a little bit. We have the weak AI, in which we are speaking of the tools that we are assigning them maybe a particular job or a class of a job to be completed, like what we are seeing from the Siri, from the chess and other stuff. And there are some other AI tools which are really designed on that. Most of the time, these kind of tools doesn't actually create a mess, but also we have a strong AI, which is, this is kind of an ambitious, which scientists, researchers, people like Dr. We are all actually wishing to achieve, like having a strong artificial intelligence, which is kind of what we say a human-like. And that has been continued being researched and stuff like that, which is most of this problem that you are hearing is what from the Twitter, for example. The problem didn't just arise, but some people claim it was triggered by the chats in which people are making. Like, remember, we said about AI that we are creating a number of data, like kind of a training data. And whenever people trying to provide a wrong information, a wrong data, kind of a training data to these tools, those are the consequences which might happen. So when it's come to the liability issues, yes, we need to get ready for that, but we also need to check around. Maybe advocates, they will help us around. We always can track the source of it, like who actually tried to provide a wrong information on the AI tools in order for it to make a worse decision that we are not intending to do that. And something else which we actually, when we are trying to look for how these tools are going to be useful or not useful, we have something called auditing. So auditing is everywhere. We also have a kind of an auditing process which need to be defined, especially to African country, which doesn't bother at all about that. And this auditing process and mechanism are really there to help out, making sure we actually get exactly what the program.
Oh, Yusuf, we can't hear you.
The people's driving cars, which actually had that kind of an incident, it was actually getting some kind of a wrong, because we need to understand we are actually relying on sensors, right? When we are relying on sensors and other stuff as getting this information to these tools, we need to expect how actually these sensors are working. Are these sensors working properly, or these sensors have a default? So there was a lot of like tips in which at the end, I believe whenever we are having a proper laws and proper auditing, we will always be able to make sure we are creating a better product. But that we always have to expect it, because what a human intelligence is not that easy as we think. It can be just taken on board and be given advice. We know there's a margin. We know there's always kind of an improvement, like what example here has been made from the books. When you are teaching a child, if the child is always asking you a question, mom, maybe dad, what is this? A pencil. What is this? A pencil. And then you are getting tired of it, right? When you are getting tired of it, you are intentionally or intentionally, sometimes you are saying, dad, what is this? A book. A child is taking that. You can imagine if you got a little bit of an experience, a child may tell you, maybe, dad, this is not a book. The machine may or may not be able to go to that extent. So there is always kind of a way in which there's this, I believe myself, there's a time that we'll be able to make somebody accountable and being able to get what we say in evidence. I know from the law point of view, we are always looking a way to make someone accountable, by making sure we are looking for a better way, how we can get an evidence, is what Nana and Kenneth has already mentioned. So there's always kind of a pinpoint in which we will reach to a stage we connected. And the good things from the computer perspective, we can trace back most of the things, what happened until we have got this kind of an incident. Having said that, we also need to remember there is a human factor when we are dealing with this stuff. When I say human factors, we have those people who are getting an advantages of an AI, whether it is weak systems, whether it's a strong systems, and we have people who always oppose the benefit of it. So like what we are getting out of it. So when we take on board all of those ideas of mindset of those people, we can actually get meeting a point where we said, okay, this is what we can do, and this is how most of these tools need to be achieved. As what you see, Dr. here, they have developed an AI tools to actually help in diagnosing the cancers. You can imagine it's not that easy to sit with an image. As what I've said, from the big data point of view, it's not that easy to sit with this much kind of data and to what extent we want these AI tools actually to be able to help as a human helping. For the current scenario, as far as I understand, we know now we are developing AI to work with human. Although the objective in the near future, when you have a car, you actually want to say this car is driving me safely to this location, to what location. But we have already been told here, did we allow this car, did we provide a correct information to these cars, to the sensors, to whatsoever part that we have developed from these kind of tools in order to make it the perfect use of it. As a human, when we say there's a certain quote I remember somewhere said, if you are looking for a human error on something, then you always have to try to make it a human. You don't have not to say this is not a human and then you are looking for a human error. So there's always a room, and we believe there's always kind of an improvement that will come up with that. So AI on the other side is good. So we always have to find a way we can balance in terms to regulation and other stuff. And then we always, as a human, we can limit. Personally, I will perfectly declare that no matter what, there will be no kind of an AI which will say it's superb, better than a human intelligence. It will always be on a certain type, because we are the one who are giving it away to make it possible. Back to you, Catherine.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for that, Yusuf. AI is a double-edged sword, so to speak, and you can look at it that way. So, I mean, thank you for that. And this, I'm looking at the time, and this conversation could go on and on. And thank you so much to the panelists. I see there are a couple of questions. So if you allow me, I'll jump to the Q&A section, and we attend to some of the questions. Hopefully we'll be able to attend to all and still make time. So I see Gilbert has said, privacy is an illusion that we protect in the world of AI and the internet. Kenneth, do you agree with this statement as it is? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is something I'd already mentioned when I was speaking. I do agree with Gilbert. I don't think any of us has privacy, man. I think with the sophistication of the applications that we use, it's not possible. We don't have any privacy the way that we think we do. I think the only question perhaps should be us getting the power back to be able to perhaps limit the extent as to which people can be able to, to see us, especially online. So I definitely agree. The questions actually that I was really interested in answering are the ones from this anonymous attendee, whoever this is. I like their questions. I don't know if I can answer them.
Anonymous attendee. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the first one was, what attitude should lawyers adopt towards the use of artificial intelligence in the legal profession? Should tools like litigation prediction and contract management be embraced, or do they encourage some sense of slothfulness? Oh, I like that. And hence should be treated with a bit of skepticism. Okay, anonymous attendee, you have really tickled me. And I think it was Catherine who already started using words like foreplay earlier on. But anyway, so if I can answer that, if I can answer that particular question, I think definitely we should be careful in the use of artificial intelligence within the legal profession. Using the examples that we've been giving, and this is a relevant example now for those of you that have children. How many of you, how many of your children use public transportation, for example, to get anywhere? You'll find that for those of you that have cars or vehicles, if you use them, your children most likely also use them as well. Now, if let's say somewhere along the line when they can talk or whatever it is, if they don't know the nuances of public transport, it may be difficult, for them to give to even have that in their minds whenever they need to get somewhere. The first thought would be, I'll either take an Uber, since I think that is still categorized as private transport, or I'll use daddy or mommy's car. Now, beyond that, the brain is really a machine that uses prediction to be able to learn and to go about things. Now, the less that you give the brain, the less that it will be able to predict outcomes. And so if you're using that same example analogy for lawyers, we have seen, for those of us that are in legal practice, that one of the biggest issues that we have with lawyers that are just getting out of law school is that problem of doing legal research. Many young lawyers do not know how to do legal research. They feel that the only place you'll be able to get any case or any sort of jurisprudence is just online, that you just go on the internet. But we forget that we have libraries. We forget that we have court registries where you have cases. You can be able to get a case as far back as the 1900s from the court registries. And so, but you also cannot blame them, because when we are teaching, I'm also a teacher, lecturer, we rarely tell the students, okay, you go visit this court registry or go visit this library to be able to, to get the material that you need. Our first point of contact is usually the internet. So I think that definitely limits that particular lawyer, in the sense that it will be difficult for them to even think about a library if they've never used it at all. Why would they be able to do so? And I think they would also be right in not thinking about the library the way that old school lawyers perhaps will. So I think the more that we use these litigation prediction tools and contract management, it definitely does encourage that sense of slothfulness, although in many respects, I'll also, as I've said, I wouldn't call it slothfulness, but rather that's the information that has been presented to you. And so we have to be careful in how we teach, in how we mentor, in how we guide the professionals that we interface with, for them we expand their minds the way that AI also expands its mind, because for narrow AI, you have to feed it specific information for it to be able to make clear predictions, at least the predictions that you want it to. So I think the two can be married, in the sense that you can allow your lawyers to use litigation prediction, or you can use contract management. But if you also understand the traditional way of preparing a contract, the traditional way of doing a case analysis, to be able to understand if a case will be, will go a certain way or not. And then the same anonymous attendee, who has very beautiful questions, also asked about using an animal instead of a baby. And yes, that is really spot on, anonymous attendee. I wish you'd give us your name. But maybe if I was to also expand that, there's a term in law that we learned, naturae ferae, which refers to a wild animal. And I think the principle is, if you keep a wild animal in your possession or in your home, and that wild animal then gets out and kills someone or attacks someone, you will be liable for that, because you have kept a wild animal which by disposition is seen as a dangerous animal. And so maybe it's important, and this is a question that I thought about when you wrote that anonymous attendee. Do we need to categorize artificial intelligence in that manner? That perhaps artificial intelligence has the nature to be dangerous, or is of the nature to be dangerous, and so we must have protocols in place to be able to safely utilize artificial intelligence. Or if we have evidence to show that artificial intelligence does not have the nature or is not of the disposition to be dangerous, then we can also be able to categorize it that way. And I think if we answer those questions that way, it may be possible to limit or to safely utilize or leverage artificial intelligence. And maybe lastly, Catherine, I think I wasn't able to share the name of the book to all the, sorry, in the chat. If ELS could just post that, because I could only send it to the host and panelists. But the book, I think it was Ronald Bagaga, was The Mind Club by Daniel Wegner and Kurt Gray. But if ELS can also just repost that for you to be able to see, because I'm not able to, I think the messages I can send are only to the host and panelists. I think, Catherine, I'll just hand over to you so that the rest can answer the other questions.
Well, thank you for that, Kenneth. So the Mind Club, I'll ask them to note that down. There's a question that you touched on, what Gilbert had asked about privacy being an illusion when it comes to the use of AI. And I want to hear what Nana's thoughts are on that as a lawyer, because is it that the concept of privacy has been redefined, so it's not what we knew as privacy to be, or, you know, is it truly an illusion in the world of AI? Nana. Nana, I don't know if you can hear me. I can see Nana is around. Okay, so if Nana is not around, let me see what else Gilbert has asked. So how can we regulate self-learning AI if it breaches some laws, and who is responsible? Can advanced AI that is self-learning be recognized as a person? I think we addressed this when the speakers talked about the issue of liability. Unless is there a panelist that would like to add on to that? Or Gilbert, do you feel like, let me know if you feel that it was responded to. There's also, Gilbert has also asked, everything we have is dangerous, it depends on how we use it. If we look at it like, then we risk losing and limiting innovation and growth in AI. And now that you talk about stifling or limiting innovation growth in AI, I'd like to throw this to Yusuf and Dr. Dio as techies. Do you feel, and I know during the session we've been talking a lot about, should the law come in to guide the confines of AI, the scope of use of AI? Do you feel that it is time, or the legislation is not yet time to regulate or to legislate on use of AI, that the lawmakers should sit back and wait for the sector, or rather the emerging area, to keep growing? And then do you feel that if we came in and regulated, it would stifle innovation in this area? What are your thoughts on that as techies? So let me start with Dr. Dio, your thoughts.
I think we needed the regulation since yesterday, because being in AI for more than 10 years now, I've seen AI projects going miserably wrong, and in healthcare. So I know it's the same case in other areas. Just to share a story, Facebook, like 4 or 5 years ago, Facebook engineers tried to create 2 AI algorithms which can negotiate on a business. We know most of the time when 2 people are doing business, one is winning, one is losing most of the time. So they wanted the 2 computers to negotiate and make sure everyone goes home happy. Then after a few iterations, they came to learn these 2 AI algorithms developed their own language. They were mixing English and machine language, the binary numbers. So they had to shut down the project just because it was going out of control. So the regulation, at least because of the regulation available in the developed countries, something like this was put into hold. Another story which happened to me, I was involved in a sociology project in the UK. That was 4 or 5 years ago. The project was we were providing mobile phones. No, it was a mobile application where people were allowed to download on their phone and take pictures of things which they see throughout the day. And later on in the evening, they just report their mood. We wanted to relate the mood of the person in the evening when he or she is going to sleep. We relate to the things which she was exposed during the day. That was the purpose of the project. And behind it, we were extracting the GPS location. But by that time, since I was an amateur in ethical matters, I started playing with that data, and I was able to know if those people were driving cars or walking, which kind of cars they are driving, if they go to nightclubs or they stay home longer, if they're loners or they like to engage with people, just by analyzing their GPS data. So that's how AI can go. And that is just the basic of it. So if we are not regulating it now, and I remember I was punished by my PhD supervisor to go on ethical training for 60 days. So at least I was in the environment where regulations were protecting the end user. Now try to imagine someone in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, who is exposed to online courses on AI on Audacity or Coursera, no regulations around it. No one taught him about the side effects of AI. Most of the time when you go online, they tell you how amazing is AI. They don't show the negative side of it. So this individual can create an algorithm which can cause disasters. So we need the regulation since yesterday. We need it now.
Oh, that is very interesting. So regulation would come in to mitigate the risks, or rather the downsides that we keep talking about that would be introduced by AI. Yusuf, I don't know what your thoughts are on this.
Doctor has actually cleared everything. It's what we have said.
Yeah. So you also believe for regulation?
Yeah, we actually need it because just take it as a knife. We all nowadays we are using knife properly just because there's a regulation that how you need to use it. So make food and don't hurt anyone. So we actually need regulation, as what Dr. has already said.
Oh wow! Okay, very interesting. So maybe I mean, and if we had time, I'd have thrown this back to the lawyers in the house on whether they think we should adopt a soft touch kind of like regulation or intense regulation. But I am notified that our time is up. It's 4 o'clock, and I'm sorry for the questions that we couldn't exhaust, but for the participants who haven't had their questions answered yet, you can email them. We have the contacts of all the panelists, and you can email the questions, and I'm sure the panelists will be able to address the questions. And if you allow me, I will just have every panelist give us their parting shot, or at least something that they would like us to take away from, if at all we haven't been paying attention for the last 2 hours or so, something that they would like to take away, us to take away or walk away with from this session. So if you can use a minute for every panelist to just say something, and then we'll end our session there. And thank you very much to our audience today and our participants. They've been quite engaging. And thank you for the panelists. Your expertise is very clear. And we can tell that all of you are very passionate about this subject and about this area. And we really look forward to 2.0 session, where we can dive deeper and on most of these concepts that came up and were very interesting. We couldn't dive deep, obviously, because of time constraints, but I think we can have a 2.0 and a 3.0 session to just dig deeper on most of these concepts. So for your closing remarks, so I'll start with Kenneth.
Catherine, thank you. It's really been a pleasure to speak and to share views with Deo, with Nana and Yusuf. Thank you very much. I think my parting shots are really a quote from an author I enjoy reading, Yuval Noah Harari, who asked a question: what is more valuable, intelligence or consciousness? That's a very deep question. And I think that is something that, this is a question that we shall interface with more, the more that we utilize artificial intelligence, at least in the next few years. And that is for you to answer now. I think at the moment, since AI is not as prevalent, maybe for me, my answer would be consciousness, but as things go further, maybe AI may be more valuable. So that's a question for all of you. What is more valuable, intelligence or consciousness? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Dio?
First, thank you very much for having me here. I've learned a lot also about the intellectual property, hanging out with lawyers. That was an amazing session. I just wanted also to share another story. Google fired their AI engineer. I think it was last month. I've shared a link on the chat who revealed the secret that Google have already developed an AI algorithm which can surpass human capacity. And the guy was fired by Google. So I've just shared just to be aware of where the AI is going. But since we have a lot of lawmakers here, I would suggest that please help us to regulate. I am an engineer. I've seen the things going wrong. Please help us to avoid this cause disasters in the industry, because we have sisters, we have mothers, we have daughters who will be the end user of this AI algorithm, and we can't control of it. But at least you guys, if you help us with the regulation and raise the voices to our governments, because I've been doing this for the past 4 years, telling people that we need regulations around AI, but nothing have happened yet, maybe because I'm not a significant one yet. So please, you guys help us to share the news and make this happen, regulate AI before we see disasters. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Dio. Yusuf?
It was really a pleasure. I have learned a lot. It's always good to sit with lawyers because they are always checking on the other angle of the stuff. We people who always love to do things, we always love ourselves to make ourselves free whenever we are creating these tools. But then we are always getting feeds on this ethical stuff and other things from the people within the likes within these rooms. And I know there was somebody who was kind of being really worried about saying the limitation of kind of innovation and other stuff. Actually, if something is well regulated, is well mentioned, is well spoken with the people who knows it, sorry to say, not by politicians, but the right people who can speak about it, then you will always get the best out of innovation, even if the law is still existing around the area. So it was really a great platform, and it was really happy. I think I was the smallest one within the team, but I'm happy I have learned a lot from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So Nana, are you still around?
Yes, hi, Catherine. I had a little connectivity issue, so I couldn't get the last section well. So I apologize for that as well. And I must confess that it's been a great session today, and I really learned a lot from the panelists as well. And I'm happy to share the little I knew about AI as well. And then in wrapping up, seeing as most of our audience are lawyers, I would like to point out that, especially to the young lawyers, that AI will never replace human lawyers. So, I mean, I think people are afraid that, especially young lawyers, there's a fear or there's a panic that in the next 10 years, AIs might replace lawyers. So I want to point out that AIs can never replace lawyers, because there's a need for human lawyers in some aspect of the profession, which data cannot replicate that. So that's all I would like to say in signing out.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, panelists. Once more, on behalf of East Africa Law Society, thank you very much. And on behalf of Sunday Ndamogoba, who is the chair of our committee. We thank you, participants, and we look forward to you attending the next session. And have a great evening.